the firefighters came, and once the fire was under control, the firefighters went inside of the house looking for survivors. So nobody is found on the first or second floor. It was a big house. The fire started in a bedroom in the basement, and that's where they found a body lying on the bed. They took the body outside and soon realized that he was dead. The body was severely burned, and a coroner was brought in. Neighbors were questioned, and it turns out the house belonged to Robert Cantor, and he lived there by himself. The body that was found was identified as Robert. He was a loving man and father. He loved sports as skiing, tennis, and kayaking. He also loved to cook. He liked to eat good food and drink wine. He was described as fun, and he didn't take himself or life that seriously. He was a software engineer, and he was married to Susan, who was a doctor's assistant. Together they had 2 daughters, Allie and Emily. In 2006, both of the daughters had moved outside of the house. So it was only Robert and Susan. The relationship between them changed after that, and they grew apart, which led to a divorce in 2010. The couple was separated, but they still lived together in the same house. After 7 months, Susan moved out and got her own place, but the divorce wasn't finalized on paper yet. The damage to the house was big. The flames must have been around 2000 Fahrenheit, and temperatures like these could wipe away almost any evidence. Robert was found on his bed, and under his execution style. With a metal detector, they found a .380 caliber shell casing under the bed. Neighbors were questioned if they saw or heard anything that evening or night. A neighbor had heard a loud bang just before midnight, and this could have been the gunshot that she heard at 23:45, a quarter to midnight. 911 was called at 11 minutes past 12. The family and loved ones received the news of what happened and they were shocked. So it is horrible that he died in a fire, but now that they got the news that he was murdered, that was even horrifying. Ex-wife Susan was being questioned, and she tells them that there was no animosity. I'm saying that wrong. Animosity between them. They still loved each other, but not just romantically anymore. They were both dating new people, and Susan gave them the name of his new partner, a woman called Sophie. And I'm not sure she had a French descendant, so I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. I'm sorry. Sophie and Robert had met in 2009 during a seminar at the National Academy of Science. She was 19 years younger than him, but they had an instant connection. They became friends and communicated through emails. They had a lot of things in common, as enjoying sports, food, and wine. A couple of months later, their relationship became romantic. And so Robert was in the middle of his divorce, so he was not really doing anything wrong. But Sophie was married. She was married to a man called Tony Tung. They had 3 daughters together, and Tony had his own company where he repaired computers and helped people that had computer problems. But the business wasn't going great. Sophie was the main provider of the family, and the finances, amongst other things, caused friction in their marriage. Police ask Sophie if Tony could be the one who killed Robert, and she denies this. She tells police that Tony was aware of their affair. Somebody, at least that's what Tony said, had sent the email correspondence between Sophie and Robert to Tony. He thought that it was someone from within the mafia, because Tony said that Robert had connections and friends with people that were in the mafia. Okay. Tony had bought a gun to protect his family from the mafia. Tony went to Robert's house to confront him about the affair in February decision was up to Sophie herself. This threatening visit was the last straw for Sophie, and with that she kicked Tony out. In March 2010, they went their separate ways, and Tony found his own place. Sophie filed for divorce, and these papers were sent to Tony to sign just a couple of days before the murder. Tony is questioned by police, and he denies having anything to do with the murder or the fire. He admitted that he went over Robert's house before to confront him about the affair. When asked about owning a gun, he said that he had a legal gun, but he turned this in when his daughters were born. Sophie had told the police about the gun, and then Tony told them that he got a gun from a friend, which he had for 1 or 2 days, and then he returned it to this friend, but he didn't say who this friend was or how did they give the gun. You know what I mean? This was a 9mm gun. His alibi was that he went out for dinner with one of his daughters that evening, and after he drove home, he arrived there at 21 p.m. He was watching TV by himself and worked on his computer, and then at 1 he went outside to buy some beer. He returned home, drank some beers, and then went to sleep. Tony is now the only suspect in the case, and he has a motive. The police doesn't have enough evidence against him, so they need to let him go. But they start to build a case against him. They get CCTV which show that he leaves Sophie's apartment at 20:20 after prosecutors said that he started planning the murders after the confrontation that he had with Robert. Tony had received the divorce papers a couple of days before, and after returning home from dinner with his daughter on March 6th, he spoke to his other daughter in the hallway, and she said that they had met a friend of her mother's that day, Robert. This enraged Tony, and he took matters into his own hands. He lifted to Teaneck because his car was left behind in New York, and there was no lead of him using a taxi service or public transportation. Tony confronted Robert again, but this time he had a gun. He followed Robert into his bedroom in the basement while holding him at gunpoint. He shot Robert in the back of the head and he fell over onto the bed. He threw ethanol over the bed and over Robert and lighted the fire. He left the house and disposed of the ethanol and the gun along the way. When he arrived at home, he tried to erase his hard drive using the sea cleaner. At 15 December 2015, the jury found Tony guilty of arson, desecrating a body, stalking, murder, and weapon charges. He was sentenced to life plus an additional 10 years. He had a second trial in 2023, but he was found guilty again, luckily. So that was the case of today. What do you think about this case? Please let me know in the comment section. My heart and thoughts go out to the family and friends of Robert, especially his ex-wife and his daughters. Were left alone without their father just because of this man, and that was so spiteful and jealous. I don't think that in this case it was about Tony being so in love with his own wife. I think it's just like, you don't get to have my wife, like things were not going great in the relationship of Sophie and Tony, like the romantic candle was burned out, and I'm not making fire references, it just popped into my mind. That's maybe not really appropriate, I'm sorry for that, but so there was no romantic connection between Sophie and Tony, and things were not going well anymore. So, and her starting a new relationship, it was an affair. Of course, that is not okay, but was responsible for his company because she got the money for his company and she was the main provider. It didn't really go well with him on his own with the company and stuff, so yeah. But still, terrible what happened, and it's a good thing that he is having a life sentence in prison. Just also really sad for his daughters and Sophie's daughters that their dad did this and that he is now in jail. So that was the case of today, and as always I want to thank you for watching and listening, and I really hope to see